Why do people hate realtors? Well,
Yeah.
that is the subject of today's video because honestly, it happens on a grand scale. And we're going to talk about why that is today.
And
So,
after our 8 years of experience, we kind of understand why people hate realtors.
yes, I hate realtors. Just kidding.
No, you don't. This is the best realtor right here, and I'm his sidekick. No.
So, if you're new here, it's Wednesday. So, we like to do Real Estate Wednesdays where we talk about something real estate related. So, the topic, like I already said, why do people have this sour taste in their mouth for realtors? And usually, obviously, it's because they had a bad experience, right? But what causes those bad experiences? Okay. Well, I've mentioned it briefly in some other videos, but the biggest issue facing the real estate community is there is no basically standard of how they run their business, right?
Right.
Like you pass your real estate test, which honestly should be a lot harder than it is, but that test is only about like real estate law, okay? It doesn't really teach you how to fill out a contract, how to explain a contract to somebody, how to make sure people understand what they're signing, and good customer rapport, or like a bedside manner, you could say. None of that is in real estate school. All they do is teach you how not to get sued. So these realtors come out of school, and if their broker is not teaching them and training them on the skills they need to actually perform their job, then you get bad experiences because there's realtors out there that are operating in a way that maybe isn't correct or is detrimental to their business, and maybe they realize it and they don't care, or they just don't know. And unfortunately, if you're one of the people that gets one of those realtors and you have this bad experience, now you have the sour taste and you just assume all realtors are the same as this experience that you just had. I'll give you an example.
Yeah, there's several, but
recently there was a situation where a client they assumed that their closing costs were always paid by the seller. Well, if you've watched any of my other videos, you know that closing costs are a negotiable item.
Yeah.
There is no standard that says seller always pays buyer's closing costs.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I'm on the seller side, so I wasn't working directly with this client, but her agent apparently did not educate her that if she needs her closing costs covered, she needs to ask for that in her offer. Now that has caused a problem for me because now we're having to switch lenders in the middle of a transaction. It's causing a little bit of not pushback, but just stress that really isn't needed if it was addressed out the gate. So now the buyer's having a stressful situation because they're still trying to meet the closing date. They don't want to lose their earnest money. They're trying to switch lenders. There's all this other stuff that has added to an already stressful process when you're buying a home anyway. Even if everything goes smoothly, there's just a lot of moving parts and it can be a lot.
Our job is to really help the buyer or the seller to be completely comfortable, and I do think communication is big on that.
Yes. And so that's just a simple example where if the realtor had been more thorough in the original consult or the initial consultation to explain all the aspects that a buyer needs to know to make the best decision for them, you could have avoided this whole scenario.
Mm-hmm.
Another example is when I was on the buyer side and there were my clients were offering on a home and I could tell it was like just way overpriced. I'm like, there's no way that this home is worth that much. And I called the other agent and I said, hey, I only see one home that is worth this. And I know that that deal was not a normal deal. And also that home has a lot of different features that the home my clients are trying to offer on doesn't have. And she was like flat out honest with me and was like, well, yeah, that's
the home
that's the only comp I'm using. And that's what the clients were wanting to get, and I was like, well, okay, well, based on that, my clients are going to offer this and here's all the reasons their offer is great. And, we want it to be a win-win for everybody. And they ended up getting the deal for the price that worked for them based on what the home was actually worth.
And did you save at least $2,000?
Yeah, it was I think it was actually $10,000 in that deal.
Okay, I remember it was a lot.
Right.
It was a lot.
So there's things like that where...
But in two, though, we were concerned about it appraising.
Right.
It would not have appraised, and then we'd had more issues to deal with.
Right. And so these are all, I'll give you another scenario in just a minute, but just to kind of preface it, The level of knowledge that your realtor has is very important, and also their communication skills. I've met a lot of agents that, unfortunately, instead of being proactive and problem solving, when something bad happens, they fly off the handle. They're yelling at everybody, they're screaming, they're sending 20 text messages. It doesn't help the situation. It makes everybody else hate you and never want to work with you again. And ultimately, it hurts their clients, because their clients want, at the end of the day, the seller wants to sell their house and the buyer wants to buy a house. And it's the realtor's job to facilitate that. No emotions involved. And I think, especially when someone uses a realtor that's in their family, that can cause a lot of issues, because obviously your family member wants to fight for you. And a realtor should have their client's best interests in mind, but also it can get a lot of emotions get involved in a family situation when the person that you're trusting to help you through this transaction is a family member. Yeah, but not to say that's always bad, but it does happen. But what I was going to get at is the level of knowledge. So there was a time when I had a client moving from out of state, from Oregon to Oklahoma, and this was actually not something I'm supposed to know, but it's something I choose to know because it helps my clients. So the lender, we negotiated a deal, and they were paying, I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was some like $6,000-$7,000 in seller paid concessions towards my buyer's costs. Well, the lender came back to me and said, well, I noticed when I saw the disclosure that it wasn't what we had negotiated. So I called the lender and I said, how come you didn't give my buyer the credit that we negotiated in the deal? And she says, well, you can't ask for that much. There's a concession limit for her loan type. And I said, I know that, but she's putting down it was 20%. So she was way above the threshold, which allowed her to do that. And the lender says, oh my gosh, you're right. That's a really good catch. I'll go ahead and adjust that. So if I wasn't knowledgeable to know that that's an issue, my client would have lost, I think she only had like $3,000 on there instead of the $7,000. So she could have been out $4,000. Nobody would have known. She would have paid it because it's one of those things that's factored into the loan. So she wouldn't even have known. And nobody would have been the wiser, except I knew, and I knew it wasn't what we had negotiated, and I knew the solution of why it was wrong. Then that's because I spent a lot of time going to classes and learning about loan types and loan products and all those things, even though I'm not a lender, because undoubtedly in the last 8 years, people come to us and ask us every question under the sun. I am a realtor, but I know obviously the financing is a big part of buying a home. So I want to make sure that we understand what those parameters are and how we can best point our clients in the right direction.
To top it off, no, I just want to say that, of course, I'm always bragging on Keller. I love Keller. Keller is not about competition. We're about the win-win on both sides. And I love that, because most of the time, all the time, if we have a win-win on both sides, everybody's happy.
Yeah.
And it should be that way. And realtors should be looked at as problem solvers, because that's what we're really here for, to make it go smooth.
It's true. I think there's a lot of agents that don't spend enough time educating themselves. And, the real estate contract changes every year. There's new policies, there's new changes in lending guidelines. There's always new programs coming out. It's an ever-changing industry. And if your realtor has been doing it the same way they've been doing it for, 20 years, odds are they're probably out of date. They're not in touch with the reality of how real estate is transacted in the current times. The other thing with reference to what Mom said about Keller Williams, it is a win-win. And when I said at the beginning how agents don't get the training that they need, Keller Williams is actually the #1 training company in the world, not just for real estate. They actually have awards for being the best level of training as far as educating their employees and their agents. They have perfect systems in place. It's a wealth of knowledge. There's always somebody to ask. And so I can attribute a lot of our success in learning about the process and having success in those situations that I gave you to Keller Williams, and having those opportunities to learn the stuff that you need to know to handle a real estate transaction properly. So hopefully this has shed some light on the real estate industry. If you've had a bad experience with a realtor, just know not all realtors are created equal. Unfortunately, there is really no standard of how you have to run your business, other than there's an ethics that says basically just be nice to everybody. But being nice is great, but also if people are losing money because of your incompetence, that's not a good look for realtors. So
no.
If you're thinking of making a move to Oklahoma, or if you're in Oklahoma and you want to, you're thinking about buying or selling a house, we would love to assist you. So what were you going to add?
Well, I was just going to add, we have another friend at Keller that told us one time that what you need to do is just know that when you're dealing in a transaction, when you're dealing in a transaction, and just you'll know right away, you may end up having to do both sides because the realtor just doesn't quite understand what's going on.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I always assume that I have to do everyone's job because ultimately I want a paycheck. So I want to make sure that my clients are happy and get to the closing table, but also the sellers too, because the seller has to get to the closing table too. So whichever side I'm on.
In being proactive, we'll make that call to the other lender. We'll ask the questions. We just want to make sure things are moving. So we make the call. It may take a little more time, something we don't have to do. We can't just assume. We have to check it out.
Exactly. Yeah, there are a lot of times where I think problems start to arise and they could easily be dealt with and handled in a timely fashion and not have an issue. But a lot of times, I think sometimes agents are afraid to rock the boat, so to speak. And so they just don't say anything. And then it finally gets to a point where it's like out of their hands and they like, oh my gosh, I can't fix this. And now all the time it's like, if you would have told me about this a week ago or 2 weeks ago, we could have handled it. It wouldn't have been an issue. So I think communication is a big part. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Share it with a friend who's maybe had a bad experience with a realtor. Maybe it will change their mind and shed some light on the subject. And of course, if you're thinking about getting into real estate, we can help you with that as well. And yeah, we'll see you in the next video.
Bye.